Good evening, gentle listener, and welcome to another gentle journey into the quiet corners of the past. Tonight we drift back to the year 1893 and pause before the stone washhouse of a country manor resting in the rolling hills of Victorian England. My invitation is simple. Settle in, slow your breath, and let the details wash over you like warm water poured from a wooden bucket.
If you are listening in bed, allow your head to nestle deeper into the pillow and feel the muscles in your neck lengthen. If you are seated, notice how the chair supports your weight without complaint. Unclench your jaw. Soften the space behind your eyes. And imagine any stubborn tension sliding away as quietly as a folded cloth slipping from a shelf. Draw a steady breath through your nose, filling the lowest part of your lungs. Hold it for the briefest heartbeat, and then let it drift outward, carrying the last sparks of the day with it. In the minutes ahead, there is nothing you must remember, and nothing you must complete. My voice, along with the distant hiss of a low hearth fire, and perhaps the soft brush of evening rain against a window, will keep you company. Each sound has agreed to remain gentle and predictable. Should sleep arrive before the tale concludes, let it. The story will continue on its own, content to wander through the washhouse without demanding your attention. If plans for tomorrow gather at the edge of your thoughts, picture them as small, polite birds that have mistaken your windowsill for their own. Acknowledge them kindly, then watch a breeze lift them back into the night sky, leaving the sill clear and cool in the lamplight. Let us agree on a measured pace. Imagine a carriage moving along a country lane at walking speed, wheels turning once every few heartbeats. That is how we will travel. No sudden corners, no bright lanterns swung in alarm, only a steady procession of ordinary moments. The washhouse before us is dim, lit by a single oil lamp that casts slow shadows across stone walls. A stack of folded linen waits nearby, destined for soaking at first light. A faint chill drifts through the doorway, yet within the room the promise of rising steam hovers like an unspoken lullaby. These words favor soft consonants and rounded vowels. Harsh edges have been left outside, alongside muddy boots and wind-tossed umbrellas. If your eyelids grow heavy, allow them to close as naturally as library doors swinging shut at twilight. Soon we will strike flint against steel, coax sparks into kindling, and watch pale steam curl toward the rafters. You will hear a wooden bucket dip into the trough and feel the glow of embers beneath brick. For now we linger at the threshold, balanced between night's hush and dawn's first murmur. I will mark time with calm phrases, each one a footstep on packed earth. You may count them if you wish, though numbers may fade like chalk marks left in gentle rain. What remains is the rhythm itself, unhurried and dependable. Every object in this room carries a story, yet none is in a hurry to tell it. A tin soapbox might wait several sentences before creaking open. A wooden mangle may turn its rollers once, then rest quietly in the pause that follows. Time stretches here as willingly as freshly laundered cotton stretched across a drying line. If your mind wanders, let it. Perhaps it traces the grain of a wooden beam, or follows the soot pattern above the stove. There is no wrong direction in this drifting. The room will remain in place, ready whenever you return. Before we step inside, release a quiet sigh. Imagine it lifting away the day's static, overlapping conversations, bright screens, tangled lists, and rising like smoke past a brick chimney to scatter among the stars gathering above the manor roof. The door stands slightly ajar, hinges oiled and waiting for a gentle push. Beyond it, the washhouse glows with the first hint of dawn. Water shivers in iron pails, soap shavings rest in a wooden bowl, and the copper waits patiently to be coaxed to life. When you are ready, or even if readiness passes unnoticed, we will cross the threshold together and begin the most unhurried of laundry days. Until that moment arrives, allow the silence between my words to widen like a calm pond at dusk. Breathe in, breathe out, and simply rest. Imagine, if you will, the gentle rhythm of an English manor as another Monday dawns. In the 19th century, Monday was almost always wash day, a ritual so predictable that the rest of the household affairs bent around it. Servants rose long before the family to begin a process older than the rafters above their heads. Laundry, in Victorian thought, was both a moral duty and a visible sign of respectability. Clean linens, crisp collars, perfectly whitened shirts, each hinted at discipline, thrift, and order. Achieving that immaculate look required hours, sometimes days, of quiet, repetitive labor, rarely noticed by those who ultimately wore the results. This quiet industry became the hidden heartbeat of a grand home. The steady turn of wooden mangles, the muffled swish of soaking cloth, the slow evaporation of scented steam that drifted upward and disappeared into dark rafters. Most manors kept a separate washhouse, a low stone outbuilding or a slate-floored annex adjoining the kitchens. Inside stood a brick copper for boiling water, large oak tubs for soaking, and a stout wooden bench where heavy irons waited to be heated. Above, slanted beams were stained by decades of drifting suds and smoke, and everywhere lingered the faint tang of lye soap mixed with damp cotton and singed ash. The weekly cycle followed an almost liturgical order. Monday, washing; Tuesday, drying; Wednesday, ironing; Thursday, folding and mending; Friday, starching the finest pieces; Saturday, airing cupboards and taking inventory. By Sunday, the linens rested as surely as the souls of those who cared for them. And then the wheel began again. To save precious daylight, water was drawn the evening before. Rain barrels, cistern pumps, and sometimes the shallow village well all contributed to the dozens of gallons required for a single household. The water sat overnight in broad wooden buckets, allowing any stray silt to settle, while firewood was stacked nearby, ready to spark at the first blush of sunrise. Soap came in many forms, but the most common was a hard, yellowish block, molded from tallow and lye. Servants shaved fine curls from the bar with a blunt kitchen knife, the flakes falling like pale petals into the Waiton tub. Bluing, a faint indigo powder, was added sparingly to counteract yellowing, while starch brewed from boiled rice or wheat flour lent stiffness to shirt fronts and cuffs later in the week. Before any garment touched boiling water, it was carefully sorted. Whites alone, colors together, woolens apart, delicate muslins kept for the gentlest hand-washing. More than mere practicality, this sorting ritual served as a silent catalog of the family's standing: fine linen napkins monogrammed in silk, servants' smocks elbow-patched at elbow and hem, Nursery bibs bearing tiny embroidered ducks. Each item told a quiet story. A housemaid might pause to smooth the lace edge of her employer's nightdress, remembering how delicate stitches once pricked her own fingertips during evening mending. A footman's waistcoat, heavy with brass buttons, hinted at dinners served beneath glittering chandeliers. A child's pinafore, stained with blackberry juice, whispered of summer rambles through dew-laden meadows. The first great immersion began at a rolling boil. Into the copper went shirts and tablecloths, pressed beneath the roiling surface with a long hickory paddle. Steam curled upward, carrying the faint scent of carbolic, and a warmth that fogged every window pane in milky swirls. While the linens scoured, servants prepared the rinse tubs, one of plain water, another tinted the palest blue, to give whites an illusory brightness cherished by housekeepers. Rinsing required patience. Garments were lifted dripping and heavy, arms straining under the sudden drag of waterlogged cloth. Each piece was plunged, swirled, lifted, and plunged again until suds vanished entirely from the weave. Only then were they wrung by hand or guided through the wooden rollers of the mangle, creaking slowly like an old gate on a windless night. Not every stain surrendered easily. Obstinate blotches of ink or gravy called for a paste of ash and soap, dabbed onto the cloth and left to rest. Grass marks yielded to lemon juice rubbed gently beneath sunlit windows, and candle wax was coaxed away with tissue-thin brown paper pressed beneath a warm iron, so the wax melted upward into the paper fibers, leaving cotton clear once more. By late morning, linens hung like silent banners across rope lines, strung between apple trees or beams within the loft. A good drying day promised steady breezes and thin cloud cover, allowing fabrics to lighten without bleaching harshly under bold sunlight. When weather soured, servants erected wooden horses near the stove, rotating pieces often to prevent smoky discoloration. An afternoon lull offered the briefest respite, a tin mug of weak tea sipped beside the copper, weary hands cradling the warm metal for comfort. Even in those moments of rest, eyes stayed watchful, gauging the sky's mood, judging the copper's simmer, listening for the faint hiss that warned of a flagging fire. Within the quiet hierarchy of Victorian service, laundry maids held a peculiar respect. Their work was grueling, yet essential. They were entrusted with the household's second skin, the fabric surfaces that touched both body and guest. They might seldom cross the dining room threshold, yet traces of their care rustled softly whenever a damask napkin unfolded in candlelight. As twilight approached, the last damp garments were lifted down, folded loosely, and stacked for the morrow's ironing. Ashes were raked from beneath the copper and scattered on the garden path to soak up puddles before morning frost. Rain barrels were covered, lids tied with rope, and soap shavings swept back into their tin. A hush settled upon the washhouse, broken only by the faint drip of residual water from the mangle's edge. Such were the customs that turned simple cloth into a symbol of domestic virtue. Rituals layered like folds of linen, each small action a quiet testament to discipline, order, and unseen devotion. It is here, at the threshold between sunlit toil and evening repose, that our story will soon step into the pre-dawn bustle of lighting the copper for the very first boil. Until then, rest easy in the knowledge of how wash day rhythms once shaped the pulse of a household. Breathe out slowly, and let the next silence widen, like the calm surface of a cooling tub. Darkness still clings to the manor grounds when the laundry-maid pushes open the wash-house door. A slice of cool morning air slips around her skirt hem and rolls across the flagstone floor. She pauses, listening to the layered quiet, the distant hoot of an owl finishing its night patrol, the hush of leaves resting after a windless night, and somewhere inside the stone walls a single, deliberate drip from yesterday's rinsing tub. She sets her lantern on the wooden bench beside the brick copper and draws the hood back so the flame glows unashamed. Its circle of light falls on iron tools, stacked firewood, and a broom leaning patiently against the wall. Shadows gather beyond the lantern's reach, yet they feel companionable rather than threatening, like familiar shapes in an untouched attic. Her first duty is to wake the copper. The great kettle stands empty, its rim soot-black, its belly lined with a faint mineral crust that tells of 100 earlier wash days. She lifts the hinged lid with both hands, mindful of the iron's chill, and props it open with a strip of folded cloth. The copper yawns wide, ready for work, and the tiny flame of the lantern flickers inside the metal basin, throwing back a pale reflection. To coax heat beneath the copper, she needs tinder, kindling, and stout logs cut the day before. She kneels at the hearth's mouth and brushes aside yesterday's ashes with the flat of a fire shovel. The cooled gray powder slides away like spilled flour, revealing dark brick beneath. Into the cleared space, she places a neat twist of straw, then a handful of dry sticks, no longer than her forearm. A flint and steel strike once, twice, and then sparks settle into the straw like fireflies seeking rest. A thin curl of smoke rises, and with gentle breath, she encourages the ember until straw becomes flame, and sticks whisper into brightness. She adds a split log, then another laid crosswise to build a small, confident blaze. Orange light pulses across the stone walls, joining the golden lantern and doubling the warmth in the room. The temperature remains cool enough for breath to show in thin puffs, but already the promise of comfort drapes itself across the wash-house like a shawl. Now the copper must drink. Buckets filled the night before stand along the wall, heavy enough that the maid must lift with knees bent and back steady. She tips the first bucket against the rim and watches water rush in with a hollow echo, splashing against iron and settling into a slow swirl. Bucket after bucket follows until the copper is comfortably 3/4 full. Tiny ripples lap against its sides. Behind each ripple, lantern light trembles like a candle, seen through water glass. She lowers the thick lid and listens as the metal edges meet with a quiet ring. Already the blaze beneath the copper spits as stray droplets find hot ash. Steam is not yet rising, but the water understands its task and begins the long, patient climb toward simmer. Next she turns to the room itself. Chill air has tucked itself into every corner overnight, and dampness lingers in the flagstones. She opens the small vent window above the mangle to let any smoke escape, then chooses 3 stout logs from the firewood stack beside the door jamb. These she places in the cast-iron stove near the ironing bench, building a second, smaller fire, whose only duty is to warm the air and prepare tomorrow's irons. The stove door closes with a gentle thunk. Almost immediately its sides tick and creak in delicate protest as metal stretches under new heat. The room responds. Droplets left on the mangle's rollers lose their chill, and a faint scent of seasoned oak mingles with the sharper note of burning straw. With both fires settled, the maid moves methodically through the space, preparing tools for the day ahead. She wipes the wooden wash paddles with a damp cloth, checking for splinters that might snag cloth later during the first boil. She lifts each iron from the bench, inspects the sole plate, and sets them in ordered pairs according to weight. Light irons for handkerchiefs, heavier ones for tablecloths, the heaviest reserved for stubborn seams on starched shirt fronts. Soap supplies receive equal attention. A tin of shaved tallow soap waits beside a smaller box of grated castile, each labeled in tidy handwriting from the housekeeper's ledger. She lifts the lids, inhales the mild scent, then returns them, ensuring the tins close with a soft click that promises readiness rather than finality. Nearby, a cloth pouch of powdered bluing lies knotted. She unties the string, checks the powder's dry texture between finger and thumb, and reties the pouch with a firm, practiced knot. While she works, daylight begins its gradual arrival. First, the smallest hint of gray slips through the vent window, tinting the smoke as it drifts upward. Then the outline of the washhouse door grows clearer. Knots in the wood grain emerge, where darkness had erased them an hour earlier. Somewhere across the lawn, a rooster lifts its voice once, then twice, as if confirming her progress. She pauses to roll her shoulders and stretch her fingers. The morning still belongs to preparation, but the most strenuous tasks are complete. Fire will handle the copper, heat will soften the air, and time will carry the water from cool to steaming. Her role for the next few minutes is simply to wait and to listen. During that waiting, she stands by the open doorway and looks east across the garden. Thin blue mist threads itself among hedgerows, and beyond, the first coins of sunlight rest on window panes of the manor's upper floor. She knows the family sleeps on, unaware of the silent industry gathering strength in this humble room. A single sparrow flutters across the threshold, perches on the doorframe, and tilts its head as if examining her work. The maid smiles, offers no movement, and the bird darts off, wings brushing the air with a whisper lighter than soap foam. Back inside, the copper lid trembles with the first true bubble, a slow rhythmic knock like distant kettle drums. She adjusts the fire by nudging a log sideways and sliding a fresh piece into the gap. Sparks leap, then settle. Steam, at last, slips from the edge of the lid and drifts toward the rafters. It carries a clean, metallic scent that signals readiness. In this moment, the washhouse feels balanced and alive, prepared for the long cadence of Monday work. Fires burn without haste, water warms toward its rolling boil, and tools rest at attention. The maid allows herself one steady breath of satisfaction, tasting smoke, soap, and cool dawn air in equal parts. Soon she will sort linens, test water temperature with a wooden spoon, and begin the first immersion of the day. For now she closes the door against the lingering chill outside, settles her lantern onto its wall hook, and lets the gentle heat wrap around her shoulders. Above the copper, fresh steam unfurls like a banner, heralding the start of another quiet wash day. Breathe with her, feel the growing warmth, and rest in the knowledge that every element is ready for the steady work ahead. The copper now murmurs with a steady simmer, and warm air circles the washhouse like a tame cat finding its favorite corner. Steam beads along the window lead and drifts upward in pale ribbons that catch the first shafts of daylight. It is time to decide what enters the water first. Order matters here, because one careless choice can tint a household's finest cloth a permanent shade of regret. The laundry-maid unfastens the wide-lidded wicker hamper in which the week's linens wait. A mixture of textures greets her eyes: soft lawn handkerchiefs, stout huckaback towels, delicate muslin collars, sturdy ticking pillowcases. She kneels beside a low sorting table whose surface has been scrubbed so often that the grain has risen into a silvery ripple. With practiced rhythm, she begins the ritual that transforms a jumble of cloth into neat, obedient stacks. First come the pure whites, reserved for the hottest water and the strongest soap. She lifts each piece by its hem and lets it unfold while daylight tests for hidden stains. Tablecloths embroidered with trailing ivy, napkins bearing a discreet family monogram, nightgowns trimmed in Valenciennes lace. Each is laid in the boil pile, edges aligned as square as a surveyor's grid. A separate corner of the table welcomes the nursery linens, small shirts, cot sheets, and bibs marked with tiny initials sewn in red cotton, so they will never wander into the wrong drawer. Next, she turns to the pale tints: pastel chemises in blush and dove, cotton slips dyed butter yellow, and a pair of mint green curtains taken down from the morning room for their quarterly freshening. These fabrics can handle moderate heat, but must not mingle with the whites, lest they share their shy colors. She strokes each garment flat with a damp palm, checking seams for weakness that might widen under agitation, then settles them into the second pile. A third stack grows from the deeper hues and patterned prints. Here lie servants' aprons of navy twill, the scullery maid's striped oversleeves, and a set of gingham kitchen cloths, tinted terracotta by years of berry jam spills. She inspects each for loose buttons, pinholes, or frayed ties. Anything fragile will receive gentler treatment later in a separate tub. Dark items risk bleeding their dye into shared rinse water, so she keeps them apart, protective and sure. Woolens form their own small community, destined for lukewarm suds rather than the copper's rolling boil. A pair of gray netted stockings, several lambswool petticoats, and 3 fine merino undershirts belonging to the master gather on a folded blanket. Too much heat will shrink these fibers beyond rescue. Too little agitation allows lingering dirt to cling stubbornly between scales. She will address them after the cottons have begun their journey. Delicates receive the most careful handling. Muslin fichus no heavier than a breath, lawn collars trimmed with seed pearl beading, lace cuffs that once bordered a wedding gown, all settle inside an open-work basket lined with an old linen napkin. These pieces will be washed by hand in tepid water and dried flat on fresh towels to prevent stretching. Their whiteness comes not from boiling, but from time, sunlight, and a judicious hint of bluing added to the final rinse. While sorting, she discovers small mysteries that speak to the week's events. A napkin bears a faint red ring smelling of claret, proof of a late supper turned lively. A child's pinafore shows 3 grass-green streaks across its pocket, evidence of an intrepid expedition beyond the orchard. An undersleeve carries a single soot smudge, likely earned during a stealthy visit to the kitchen hearth on a chilly morning. She notes each story silently, and decides which remedies will follow. Salt on the wine, lemon on the grass, breadcrumb on the soot. Between piles, she slides wooden markers etched with tidy lettering. Whites, lights, darks, woolens, delicates. The tokens are worn smooth along their edges. Long ago, a senior laundry maid carved them during an evening off, and every successor has preserved the habit. The markers serve less as labels for the current worker. She needs no reminder of what her hands already know, and more as a teaching tool should a younger apprentice arrive. Having divided the linens by color, she sorts again by intended use. Bed sheets belong together so that their final starch level remains consistent. Table linens gather beside them to receive a faint scent of lavender water in the rinse. Towels stack separately, ready for a vigorous boil that will chase germs away. Household dusters, service aprons, and kitchen cloths cluster in their own pile, destined for second-hand rinse water after the finer fabrics are clean. The maid's hands move with measured certainty, yet she never rushes. Each fold becomes an act of small devotion, a private vow that no collar will yellow and no lace will tear on her watch. Occasionally she pauses to straighten her back, letting the mild warmth from the stove ease the muscles across her shoulders. Outside, sparrows scratch among the gravel for breakfast crumbs, and the manor's stable boy whistles a tune that floats faintly through an open vent. When the last article finds its rightful stack, she surveys the table. The piles stand like ordered battalions, crisp whites ready for battle with boiling water, calm pastels awaiting their turn, dark colors gathered in solidarity, woolens resting quietly, and delicates sheltered within their basket. She nods once, satisfied, then lifts the whites in both arms and carries them to a waiting wooden tub. The linen slides in with the faintest sigh, like snow falling into soft drifts. She adds hot copper water by the ladleful, then sprinkles curled flakes of tallow soap across the surface, where they melt and swirl. Back at the table, she pours lukewarm water into a second tub for the pale tints and moderate colors. The steam here is gentler, carrying a scent of fresh cotton and faint lemon soap. She stirs with a wooden paddle, creating a small whirlpool that gathers every sleeve and hem into its gentle pull. With both tubs soaking, she wipes the sorting table clean, guiding stray threads and lint into a small tin, then folds the protective cloth and sets it aside. The room is quieter now. Only the low splash of soaking fabric and the soft crackle of the stove break the morning hush. She rests her hands on the table's edge, feels the warmth radiating upward, and allows herself a single, slow breath of satisfaction. The linens have accepted their places, the colors are safe, and the path to cleanliness lies clear. Outside, sunlight climbs higher, painting gold across the washhouse door. Inside, the maid turns toward the copper, ready to test the water with a wooden spoon and begin the first true boil of the day. Every pile she sorted will soon meet soap, water, and steady hands. But in this brief pause, the simple order she has created feels as complete and calm as a solved puzzle. Breathe in the quiet. Feel the promise of warm water, and know that the hardest choices of the morning are already behind us. The sorting is complete, and the washhouse now feels composed. Piles orderly, water warming, fires humming with quiet purpose. The next step is gentler than the boil, yet just as vital. Pre-soaking allows soap and warm water to slip through every weave before the rigors of agitation begin. It is also the moment when stubborn marks receive careful attention, one cloth at a time, so that no surprise blemish spoils a table setting or a Sunday collar. The laundry maid moves to the first tub, where the whites are already steeping. Steam drifts upward and falls again like a thin veil. She lifts a napkin by two corners and lets surplus water fall back in rhythmic drops. The cloth hangs limp, receptive. With her free hand, she sprinkles a modest pinch of soda crystals across the stain that rings one edge. A souvenir of claret spilled during a recent dinner. Using the pad of her thumb, she presses the crystals into the fibers, working in slow circles until the powder disappears. The napkin returns to the water where it can rest, allowing chemistry and time to do quiet work. Next she checks a nightgown trimmed in lace. Tiny pearly buttons glint in the lanternlight, and along one cuff a faint shadow of candle soot lurks near a seam. Bread is the cure. She reaches for a small plate that holds slices cut from yesterday's loaf, now slightly dry, perfect for blotting grease and soot. She presses a cube of crumb against the mark, lifting little flecks of soot each time. The process resembles dabbing with a sponge, each press light, deliberate, patient. After several passes, the cuff looks clear. The gown slips back into the tub, floating like a pale lily on warm water. The maid sets a timer in her head. Whites need at least 20 minutes of gentle soaking. While they rest, she turns to the second tub, where pale tints and moderate colors wait. Here she kneels on a folded cloth to examine a mint-green chemise bearing two neat freckles of blackberry. Summer stains are persistent. Lemon helps. She cuts a small wedge from the stalk of fruit kept in a crock near the stove, and squeezes a bead of juice onto the purple dots. The juice seeps outward, loosening the berry's pigment. With a soft brush, she coaxes the stain from the center outward, dipping the brush into the tub between strokes. Slowly the purple fades to lavender, then to a memory. The chemise remains gentle in hue, none the worse for her attentions. A pair of dove-gray stockings presents different trouble. A ribbon of mud along the heel where garden soil clung after rain. For earth stains, she favors a thin paste of soap shavings and wood ash. She mixes the paste in a china saucer, adding just enough water to make it spreadable. Kneeling once more, she coats the mud stripe and lets the paste rest so fine ash can lift grit from the woolen loops. Environmental stains yield best when left undisturbed. She will revisit the stockings later, after the paste has had time to draw the dirt away. At the third tub, dark fabrics steep in cool water, tinted with a teaspoon of salt to curb dye bleeding. She removes a navy servant's apron, noting a diagonal streak of paraffin. Grease responds to heat and absorbent powder. She sprinkles French chalk across the streak, then places the apron on a clean board near the stove, where gentle warmth will encourage the chalk to pull oil upward. Later, she will brush the powder away, and if needed, apply a second dusting. Now she wipes her hands on a cloth kept for that purpose, and stands quietly, listening to the house beyond the washhouse walls. Hoofbeats echo faintly as the stable boy leads a mare to pasture. A kitchen window thuds open, releasing the aroma of yeast and warm dough. These small sounds remind her that the larger household is stirring. Yet in this room, time remains her own, measured only by steam curls and water ripples. Returning attention to the whites, She stirs the tub with a wooden paddle. Linen napkins drift past like small sails, turning lazily. She counts each piece as it surfaces, checking that nothing clings unseen at the bottom. When 20 minutes have passed, she lifts a damask tablecloth into a nearby enamel basin for inspection. Along one edge, she finds a ghost of red wax, likely from a dining room candle that dripped unnoticed. Wax must be coaxed out rather than scrubbed. She folds the cloth so the stain faces inward, sandwiches the fold between 2 layers of thin brown paper, and sets a barely warm iron atop the paper. Heat softens the wax, paper absorbs it, and patience completes the task. After 2 minutes, she lifts the iron, peels back the paper, and, if a faint outline remains, repeats the ritual until nothing red lingers. With the whites now free of visible blemish, she transfers them to a draining rack fashioned from ash wood. Each cloth rests only long enough for excess water to slip away. Soon they will plunge into the copper for their first vigorous boil, but allowing them to drip spares the copper from cooling and keeps the water line steady. She returns to the pale tint tub. The lemon-kissed chemise looks bright once more. She turns attention to a child's pinafore marked by grass. The stain has lightened in the soak, but requires persuasion. She dabs the spot with a mixture of vinegar and salt, then rubs gently against a glass washboard, using slow strokes that echo heartbeat rhythm. Gradually, green recedes until only white cotton remains. She smiles, imagining the child who will soon test the fabric's resilience anew in the orchard. At the dark fabric board, the French chalk has turned from white to gray, proof that paraffin has migrated upward. She shakes the chalk off outside the door, then brushes fibers smooth with a stiff clothing brush. No shadow of grease remains. She folds the apron neatly and lays it beside the other dark pieces, awaiting their cooler wash. The gray stockings, coated in ash paste, are next. She dips them into a basin of lukewarm water and squeezes along the heel until paste dissolves and carries grit away. Fabric emerges soft and clean. She rolls the stockings in a towel, presses out water, and adds them to the reserved woolens pile. When every stain has had its treatment, the maid stands amid tubs and racks, feeling a quiet sense of order. She tips used lemon halves and spent breadcrumbs into a small pail for compost, wipes saucers clean, and returns soap tins to their shelf. Nothing smells of harsh chemicals. Only citrus, mild tallow, and faint wood smoke linger in the air. Pre-soaking has softened fibers, lifted hidden soil, and prepared each piece for the first true boil. Outside, sunlight slides further along the washhouse floor, turning steam golden. Inside, the maid flexes her fingers, picks up the sturdy paddle, and steps toward the copper. Water inside now rolls with confident bubbles, ready to meet linen and soap. She breathes once, steady and calm, knowing that careful stain rituals will allow the coming hours of washing to proceed without surprise. The day's quiet victory begins here, in the patient work of pre-soak and remedy. The copper stands ready, its lid lifted just enough for steam to drift upward in pale twists that merge with the hazy air under the rafters. Water rolls inside with an unhurried confidence, a quiet percussion that fills the washhouse like distant drums heard through heavy curtains. The moment has come to introduce the first load of linen to heat, soap, and motion. The laundry-maid starts with the stack of pure whites. Each piece has finished its soak, stains either banished or softened. She gathers 2 tablecloths, a half-dozen napkins, and 3 nightgowns, cradling the pile against her apron. The fabric is warm from the tub, heavy with water, pliant as bread dough after rising. At the copper's edge, she lowers the linen slowly, letting the cloth slip beneath the surface rather than drop. Bubbles leap and then subside. A faint hiss rises as cooler fibers meet hotter water, but the boil never loses its rhythm. Now she reaches for the soap box. Inside lie curls shaved from a solid block of yellow tallow soap, each curl no thicker than a ribbon of orange peel. She lets a handful fall between her fingers. Curls scatter across the water, swirling in lazy circles until heat begins to melt them into cloudy threads. With a wooden paddle she stirs, drawing broad figure-8 paths that glide from rim to rim. The motion is steady, almost ceremonial, and as she moves the paddle, suds bloom. They gather first in fragile clusters, then knit into a thick white cap that rides atop the water. Soap scent drifts outward, clean, mild, edged with the faintest note of rendered fat. Far from harsh, it feels familiar, grounding, almost like the aroma of fresh dough in the kitchen. The maid inhales once, then returns to stirring, careful not to slap the paddle against iron. Every sound in this room is chosen for softness. The bubbles hug the copper's sides, reflect lantern light, and pop with the gentlest sigh. She pauses to check temperature. A long-handled wooden spoon rests nearby, its bowl darkened by countless immersions. She dips the spoon into the water, lifts a spoonful of clear liquid overhead, and watches how quickly droplets fall. Too slow would mean the water has cooled. Too fast might threaten delicate lace. The stream is even, neither sluggish nor reckless, and she nods with quiet approval. Gentle agitation is next. She hooks the paddle under the linen and raises it, allowing each piece to turn over itself, ensuring soap reaches every fold. She keeps the motion rhythmic. Lift, fold, press, stir. Between movements, she lets the fabric settle so heat can work without haste. On a separate table, a metal hourglass marks 15 minutes of time. Each grain of sand drops without any need for a tick or chime. As she works, the rest of the washhouse seems to breathe with her. Steam condenses on the window panes, forming beads that race downward like small glass comets. Fire pops beneath the copper, but its wood is seasoned and burns evenly, producing more glow than crackle. In a far corner, irons warm on the stove, their handles standing upright, like miniature flags announcing future tasks. Halfway through the boil, she adds a whisper of bluing water. Just 2 ladles tinted the faintest indigo, so whites will emerge bright rather than sallow. The blue disperses quickly, disappearing into opaque suds, yet she knows its work will remain after bubbles collapse. She stirs again, letting linen drift, then retrieves the nightgown closest to the surface. She lifts it by the shoulders and studies the cloth. Buttons shine. Lace remains intact. No trace of soot or wax appears. She eases the gown back into the copper and resumes her gentle rotation. The hourglass empties its final grains. She sets the paddle aside and lifts the lid fully, letting a cloud of steam billow upward. Through that mist, she sees water now carrying faint gray murk. The soil once lodged in hems and cuffs has dissolved and surrendered. She slides a slotted wooden board over the copper's rim, a ramp that guides dripping linen toward an enamel basin. One by one, she draws pieces from the water with a long wooden fork, lays them across the board, and allows heat to drain away. Drops patter into the basin, each sound light as rain on roof slate. When the basin holds its quota, she carries it to the nearby rinse tub, filled earlier with clear water, cooled to a friendly warmth. She eases cloth into the rinse, letting it sigh downward. With both hands, she swishes linen in wide arcs, coaxing soap out until foam thins and water turns only faintly cloudy. She changes rinse water once, sometimes twice, determined that no leftover suds dull the eventual starch. Finally, she twists each piece gently along its length, driving out most of the water without wringing creases that would haunt the ironing board tomorrow. Linen hangs briefly over a draining rod, droplets gathering at corners before falling free. Sunlight now pushes through the vent window, painting the suspended cloth in a soft morning gold. In that light, every thread appears orderly, every weave sure of itself. Back at the copper, she skims stray suds from the surface with a perforated ladle, feeding them to the slop bucket kept for garden compost. Once clear, she refreshes the fire. One slim log laid across glowing embers brings the water back to a ready boil. Another batch of whites stands prepared. More napkins, pillowcases, a length of altar cloth loaned from the village church for festival laundering. Work continues in a calm cycle. Load, soap, stir, lift, rinse, drain. Throughout, her movements remain unhurried. She grips the paddle with steady hands, breathes in tandem with the cadence of the boil, and listens to the subtle orchestra of steam, fire, and falling water. No task feels rushed, yet every minute is purposeful. The Washhouse has become a quiet engine of transformation, turning soiled fabric into purity, with nothing more than heat, soap, and deliberate human care. When the sun reaches the height of the window frame, she pauses. The copper water is due for replacement before it clouds beyond usefulness. First, though, she allows herself a single swallow of cool well water from a tin cup resting on the window ledge. The drink revives without startling her senses. She sets the cup down, rolls her shoulders, and glances across the room. Linen drains in neat rows. Fire burns true. Water still trembles with tiny rising beads. The first boil has kept its promise. Whites are clean, lace remains whole, and the Washhouse carries the bright, honest scent of soap-breathed steam. She knows many hours lie ahead, second and third rinses, starching drying lines under open sky. But for now, she dwells in the quiet satisfaction of seeing the copper do its ancient, dependable work. Breathe with her, feel the warmth of rising vapors, and rest in the comfort of a task well begun. The first boil has done its heavy work, and the Washhouse air feels brighter for it. Yet soap hides in stubborn corners of every fold, and a slight gray haze lingers in the fibers. 2 more baths will coax that residue away and leave the linen clear as early frost. The laundry maid prepares for this gentler phase, much as a gardener prepares seed beds, quietly, methodically, with a steady respect for water. She begins by emptying the earlier rinse tub, tipping its spent water into the sluice drain set into the flagstone floor. A curtain of cloudy suds rushes away, swirling before vanishing beneath the house. She rinses the tub with a single bucket of fresh water, swishing the wooden paddle in broad arcs until the pale film breaks and flows out. Only when the tub's interior shines faintly does she refill it. She lifts bucket after bucket from the well. careful to keep the surface calm so stray silt remains settled. The water lands with a rounded splash, and soon a clear pool waits, reflecting roof beams like dark strokes on glass. While the tub fills, she checks temperature with her forearm. Too hot would shock the linen. Too cold would tighten soap into dullness. She wants water warm enough to be comforting, but never scalding. So she adds 1 kettle of copper water to the mix, stirring until a faint curl of steam rises. The balance is perfect when she can keep her arm submerged for a slow count of 10 without discomfort. She nods once, satisfied. Now she gathers the first batch of whites from the draining rod. Each piece feels lighter than before, but still damp and pliant. She folds tablecloths lengthwise to keep edges from dragging and lays them across her arm. Nightgowns follow, draped like pale wings. Napkins sit atop the stack in small squares, each one glowing with a new-earned brightness. The basin tilts as she transfers the load into the rinse water. Linen settles with a hushed sigh, air bubbles slipping free and popping on the surface. With both hands, she presses the cloth beneath the water, then lifts gently, allowing currents to pass through seams. She repeats the motion in a slow rhythm: press down, lift, fold, and release. The action bears no resemblance to the vigorous stirring of the boil. It is closer to rocking a cradle, steady, reassuring, unhurried. Soap traces cloud the water at first, but each stroke draws them toward the surface where they disperse like morning mist. She pauses after several repetitions, letting fabric rest while the water equilibrates around it. 10 minutes pass, measured by the quiet drip of steam condensing from the copper lid. During that pause, she prepares a second tub for the final rinse. This one receives the faint magic of bluing. From the shelf, she takes a small cotton pouch, its drawstring knotted neatly. Within lies powdered ultramarine mixed with rice starch to temper its strength. She swirls the pouch through the water in a figure 8, eyes fixed on the color until the barest hint of sky appears. A misguided swirl can leave linen-tinted lavender, so she tests by dipping a scrap of muslin. The cloth rises, looking no bluer than freshly fallen snow. The water is ready. Returning to the first tub, she lifts every piece of linen one by one and squeezes gently, driving water back into the pool. Excess soap has fled. The cloth feels almost weightless now. She transfers the load into a wicker basket, takes it to the bluing tub, and lowers items carefully, spreading them so water reaches every fold. A few bubbles rise and burst, each one catching a shard of lanternlight before vanishing. She stirs with a slender wooden stick, ensuring no cloth clings where dye concentration might settle. The water remains clear, its blue completely invisible in depth, yet she trusts the chemistry at work. While the linens bathe, she turns to the draining rod and resets it. A fresh towel covers the smooth wood to prevent bluish drops from staining the rod itself. She also places a narrow slatted board across the tub's rim, ready for lifting heavy tablecloths without twisting. The room around her stays calm. Fire murmurs, steam hovers, and the distant clock in the servants' hall strikes 9, its soft chime threading through an open vent. After another measured span of minutes, she lifts the first napkin, holding it up to the lantern. Fibers glisten, free of soap, tinged with a clarity that was absent only half an hour before. Fabric feels brisk between her fingers, neither slimy nor stiff. She gives the napkin a slow flick, allowing surplus water to fall back, then drapes it over the rod. One by one, she repeats the motion. Tablecloths rest along the slatted board for support, their edges falling in graceful arcs. Nightgowns hang lightly, lace trims curling inward like petals. Bluing water remains almost as clear as when she began, proving her restraint. She saves it for the next batch of whites, but first she empties the earlier soap rinse, sending the gray water down the drain in preparation for colored linens. No bluing will touch those. They require only warmth and clarity. She rinses the tub swiftly and refills it with cool water drawn directly from the well. At the draining rod, droplets gather at cloth corners, falling onto a shallow tray placed below to keep floors dry. Each drop lands with a soft pat, audible only because the washhouse has grown so still. She checks seams again, noting that lace has not puckered. Monograms lie flat, and every button gleams. Satisfaction registers not as a smile, but as a loosening of her shoulders. The bluing rinse complete, she takes the wicker basket to the stove where irons wait. There the linen will rest in gentle heat, encouraging moisture to depart before it faces the open-air lines outside. For now, the cloths remain warm, but not hot, folded rather than hung to keep edges even. She layers them in the basket with thin muslin squares between to prevent imprints. The second and third rinses have left water clear, cloth luminous, and the room perfumed only by faint soap and a sharper mineral note rising from the well. Of all the stages in wash-a-day, these rinses require the quietest attention. No roaring boil, no hard scrubbing, only balance, temperature with touch, clarity with color, patience with time. In that quiet, she finds a hidden rhythm, something small and personal that hums beneath the larger pulse of the manor. Outside, the sun climbs higher, promising breezes that will serve the drying lines. Inside, buckets stand ready for the next shift of linens, darker colors that must be rinsed in cooler water without any trace of bluing. The maid draws a steady breath, wipes her hands on a cloth folded at her waist, and prepares to open the door to the yard. Fresh air will carry away steam, and sunlight will welcome the whites like banners of a well-run household. She walks toward the door, basket balanced on one hip, and as hinges swing wide, she feels the cool kiss of morning wind. The second and third rinses are finished, their gentle work complete, and the linen is ready to meet the day. The whites have left the bluing rinse glowing with new life, and the washhouse, thick with steam a short while ago, now stands ready to release its work to open air. Drying is more than simply waiting for water to vanish. It keeps colors true, discourages mildew, and shapes fabric, so the iron's path tomorrow will be smooth and quick. The laundry maid moves toward the door, basket balanced on one hip, her free hand already testing the breeze that slips through the threshold. Outside, the manor yard stretches toward an orchard bordered by rough stone walls. 4 taut rope lines run between chestnut posts, sunk deep into the soil. Each post leans ever so slightly away from its partner, a testament to years of wind tugging at linen like industrious hands. A 5th spare line lies coiled near the garden gate, ready in case the family entertains guests and the usual washing doubles. The sky promises cooperation, blue-brushed with feathery clouds, sunlight warming the grass but not scorching. Still, the maid's habit, shaped by countless English summers, insists on vigilance. She glances west, where weather often gathers, noting the tone of distant clouds and listening for the low mutter that hints at hidden thunder. Satisfied for now, she sets her basket at the head of the first line. Wooden pegs fashioned from willow sit in a small canvas pouch tied around her waist. Their springless grip relies on a simple V-cut that slots over rope and cloth. Each peg bears the polish of long use, smooth enough that no stray splinter threatens to catch a loose thread. She draws to and pins the first napkin to the uppermost rope, letting its lower edge hang free. Sunlight flashes through damask weave, and a gentle flap begins as the breeze finds purchase. She pins the second corner to ensure the cloth does not twist. The rhythm repeats. Peg, stretch, clip, release. Tablecloths need broader support, so she folds each lengthwise over the line rather than pinning both edges. Gravity helps pull creases straight, and the center seam created by the fold will press out easily tomorrow. Nightgowns go to the middle rope, their lace trims hanging low like quiet smiles. Pillowcases follow, grouped in pairs, so that matching sets souvenir each other on the line. As she works, she keeps an internal map, whites farthest from the ground where stray mud cannot splash them, colors below, and heavy pieces such as towels on the lower rope, where extra weight will not sag the post. Space between items matters too. Linen needs room to breathe. If cloths touch, moisture lingers in the overlap and leaves a damp ghost. She steps back once all pieces hang, scanning for crowding and adjusting a corner here, a peg there. The line now resembles a series of billowing sails caught in a mild sea wind, each panel crisp and orderly. While sunlight continues its steady climb, she heads indoors to fetch the colored loads. The second rinse has left them clear but still cool to the touch. These pieces, aprons, gingham cloths, the mint green chemise, can brave gentle sun. Yet strong afternoon light might coax colors into fading. She chooses the east-facing lines for them, knowing that by midday those ropes will settle into light shade cast by orchard trees. Noon approaches, and with it, a rising breeze. The maid returns outside to check pegs and observe how cloth moves. Proper flutter speeds drying, but vigorous flapping can strain seams and loosen stitches. She runs a palm along the lower edge of a tablecloth. The weave already feels lighter, moisture rising to the surface where air can whisk it away. She tugs gently at one end to relieve tension and retightens the peg. Despite the fair sky, English weather has a talent for sudden revisions. A slim barometer fixed near the washhouse door becomes her silent advisor. She notes the mercury has dropped a hair's breadth since morning. Nothing dramatic, but experience teaches respect for even the smallest shift. She lifts her gaze again to the horizon. A lean gray band now skulks above distant treetops. Inside, two collapsible wooden horses stand ready. Each resembles a low ladder with rungs wide enough to cradle folded cloth. She opens both, sets them near the stove where warmth will circulate, and tests that the joints lock true. The stove fire idles on a few glowing coals, enough to lift the chill without filling the room with heavy heat. An open vent, high in the wall, promises fresh airflow to carry any dampness outside. A soft patter lands on the roof, the first scouting drops of an uncertain shower. The maid reacts with unhurried precision. She crosses the yard, unpins napkins row by row, folding them in halves so exposed surfaces never meet mud. Larger cloths come down next. She drapes each over one arm and presses lightly, encouraging trapped breeze to leave without ringing sharp creases. Though she moves quickly, her hands remain gentle, respecting fibers that have only just relaxed after their scalding bath. Back inside, she arranges the retrieved linen across the drying horses. Nightgowns rest on the top rungs where warm air lingers. Napkins lie flat, edges aligned like cards in a patient game. Tablecloths take the lowest rows, their weight bending wood slightly but safely. She leaves a 2-finger gap between each piece to invite circulation. The stove breathes faint warmth, rising through rungs and carrying moisture upward. Rain increases outside, drumming lightly on slate shingles. The washhouse fills with a soft, enclosing hush, punctuated by occasional pops from the stove. The maid leans against the doorway, watching steam rise from cloth and curl toward the vent. A different kind of drying begins, slower and more predictable. Indoor air will never bleach fabric unevenly, nor will wind snap a hem loose from its peg. Patience becomes the chief ingredient, and patience is something this room understands well. After arranging whites on horses, she steps back into the yard to collect colors still swinging beneath orchard branches, now damp but not soaked. She chooses a covered walkway that runs along the kitchen wall, stretching a spare rope beneath its sheltering eaves. There the colored items can continue drying without sun or rainfall interfering. Pegs click in place, and cloth settles in soft curves. With all linen secured under roof, she closes the yard gate and returns inside. Rain taps steadily above, but the washhouse feels snug, fragrant with soap and faint wood smoke. She checks each horse, adjusting folds so weight distributes evenly. A final survey assures her that nothing drips onto the floor stones and no stitch strains against its neighbor. Drying is a study in balance, sun and shade, breeze and stillness, vigilance and trust. The maid embraces that balance, knowing that how cloth sleeps tonight will decide how smoothly it yields to the iron tomorrow. She leaves the linen to its quiet transformation, extinguishes 2 lanterns to save oil, and settles on a low stool with her ledger. Outside, rain cleanses the air. Inside, heat coaxes water to wander slowly away. In this partnership of weather and hearth, the day's work advances without hurry, and the fabric of the household inches closer to spotless rest. Morning light leans through the washhouse window, landing on cloth that rested overnight across drying horses. Linen now feels cool rather than damp, carrying only a trace of warmth stored from the stove. Today belongs to heat of a different sort, the disciplined, deliberate heat of the flat iron. If washing is the cleansing of a household skin, ironing is the smoothing of its outward expression, letting every garment breathe confidence without saying a word. The laundry maid begins by waking the stove. Yesterday's coals slumber beneath a thin crust of ash. She rakes them gently, feeding 2 small splits of birch, whose pale bark catches flame with a friendly crackle. Ironing demands steady heat, not the fierce blaze used beneath the copper. She adjusts the damper until a slow orange glow settles behind the iron grate. On a nearby shelf, 5 gooseneck irons wait in ranked order. Their graceful handles curve upward from broad, triangular soles, polished to a muted shine. Each iron carries a Roman numeral stamped near the heel, marking weight and intended purpose. I and 2 for fine handkerchiefs, 3 and full for shirts and nightgowns, and the stout V for stubborn seams and pleats. She lifts number 3, feeling its pleasing heft, then sets all 5 along the stove's hot plate, heels together, noses pointing east, like geese ready to migrate. While metal warms, she prepares the ironing station, a broad pine board covered in fresh calico, stretched tight and secured beneath with brass tacks. A sleeve board stands nearby for narrow cuffs, and a padded roll, no thicker than a broom handle, waits to press gathers without crushing texture. On the table she sets a small bowl of clean water, a linen pressing cloth, and a glass sprinkler bottle fitted with the cork pierced by holes. The water will tame stubborn creases, the cloth will shield delicate embroidery, and the sprinkler bottle will offer the gentlest mist, nothing more intrusive than early morning dew. To test iron temperature, she sprinkles a few drops onto the calico, then taps the sole plate against the damp spot. A soft hiss, followed by an almost immediate fade, tells her the heat is right, hot enough to evaporate swiftly, yet not so fierce that cotton will scorch. She lifts the first nightgown from the horse. The fabric drapes over her arm like liquid moonlight, lace cuffs tumbling in quiet scallops. She lays it face down, smooths the yoke, and covers the lace with the pressing cloth. Iron 3 glides from collar toward hem in straight, measured strokes, each pass overlapping the last by a finger's width. The iron's weight does half the work. Her arm guides rather than presses. Every few strokes she returns the iron to its place on the stove, exchanging it for iron 2, now fully warmed. The swap prevents the first iron from cooling and keeps the rhythm unbroken. Heat, glide, exchange, breathe. She flips the nightgown, easing pleats flat with the padded roll before the iron follows. Lace edging feels crisp under the cloth, but never brittle. When finished, she lifts the gown by its shoulders, letting the fabric fall in an elegant cascade. No wrinkle mars the line from neckline to hem. It joins a growing rail of completed pieces hung on wooden hangers near the door, where air circulates freely. Next come shirts. These demand a stricter sequence, back first, then sleeves, then fronts, and finally collars. She sprinkles the yoke with the lightest mist, enough to darken cotton by a shade. Iron 4 presses from center outward, chasing faint moisture toward the edges where it escapes into the room as invisible steam. Sleeve boards cradle each arm, while she coaxes seams to lie like ruler-straight paths. Cuffs receive iron 2, smaller and lighter, its narrower nose sliding between gathered pleats and brass buttons. The rhythm of ironing fills the washhouse with an almost musical cadence. The quiet thud of irons settling on the stove, the whisper of fabric shifting, faint hisses as water meets hot metal, and the breath of the maid matching each movement. Outside, pigeons call from the orchard roof. Inside, metal and cloth compose their own morning hymn. Starch enters the scene with table linens. Yesterday's rice starch mixture now sits in a stoneware jug, milky and cool. She submerges each napkin, lifts it, and draws the cloth between thumb and forefinger to squeeze away excess until the weave feels merely damp, not sodden. Napkins are snapped once, sharply, to align fibers, then folded corner to corner before meeting iron V. The heavy sole plate presses starch deep into linen, leaving surfaces smooth with a subtle crispness that will crackle pleasantly when unfolded at table. Embroidered tray cloths receive special care. She places each face down on a thick felt pad to protect raised stitching. The pressing cloth covers the design, and iron 3 drifts across the reverse side, allowing heat and a hint of moisture to coax wrinkles from the background fabric, while embroidery survives untouched. When she flips the cloth, threads gleam, sitting proud against linen like tiny jewels. Frilled pillow shams require patience. She winds the padded roll through every ruffle, coaxing gathers open before introducing iron 2. Working inch by inch, she presses the inner fold, then lifts, moves, and presses again. The process recalls trimming a hedge with careful snips, ensuring uniform wave without flattening volume. Finished frills spring lightly when jostled, ready to frame pillows with effortless flourish. Throughout the morning, she rotates irons in a graceful loop, always maintaining one at peak heat, one in use, one cooling slightly. She wipes each sole plate on a folded rag, sprinkled with fine salt to remove starch buildup. The salt sizzles, taking with it any residue that could smudge white cloth. Handles warm her palms but never burn. A small square of folded flannel wraps each grip to tame lingering heat. By late morning, a gentle brightness fills the room. Ironed garments line the rail, their silhouettes orderly as soldiers on review day. Shirts stand crisp. Nightgowns flow like spun sugar. Frilled shams billow softly, and napkins await their place at tomorrow's luncheon. She pauses, leaning the last iron upright, and surveys her work. The washhouse smells now of faint starch, warm cotton, and a trace of birch smoke. Steam no longer clouds the air. Instead, a subtle shimmer hovers above the stove where irons cool. She lets the fire die down, closing the stove vent until embers fade to dull ruby. Irons are wiped once more, cooled on a metal rack, and stacked by weight, ready for next week. The calico cover lifts from the board, shaken outside to scatter lint into the breeze. Sun peeks through drifting clouds, dazzling off polished sole plates like small mirrors reflecting a job complete. Ironing requires neither haste nor hesitation, only presence, precision, and a kind regard for the cloth that spends its silent life in service to others. As she closes the washhouse door to midday light, the maid carries with her a quiet pride, stitched into every flattened seam and sharpened pleat. The garments will rest overnight, fibers settling into their new order, and tomorrow they will slide into drawers and wardrobes, ready to speak softly of care whenever touched. Breathe in the calm that lingers on warm cotton. Exhale any last crease of tension, and know that the iron has laid its gift of smoothness across the fabric of the household. The irons rest on their rack, cooling to a comfortable shade of ash gray, and the washhouse stands quiet, except for the faint tick of metal contracting in the stove. Linen now carries no dampness, only the warmth of recent care. The final duty is as important as washing and ironing, for a cloth that is folded poorly or stored carelessly can unravel a day's work in an afternoon. Folding, airing, and pressing give every piece a safe wintering place, until duty calls again. The laundry maid begins with the wide pine table, swept clean of salt and lint. She spreads a fresh sheet of unbleached muslin across the boards, its weave smooth enough to keep white linen spotless. At her feet stands a stout wicker basket filled with ironed cloth, arranged in neat ranks. She lifts the first tablecloth, supporting its length over both arms. Cotton drapes in a crisp waterfall, edges aligned as precisely as rail sleepers. Folding follows a deliberate geometry. She lays the cloth face down, smoothing stray ripples with the flat of her hand. Long edges meet in the center, one after the other, like shutters closing over a quiet window. Short edges follow the same inward journey. The resulting rectangle is no wider than a book and perfectly uniform. She slides 2 fingers along each fold, pressing gently to invite fibers to remember their new position. Each finished cloth stacks atop its fellow, corners aligned so precisely that the pile resembles a single block of white marble. Napkins come next. Their smaller squares allow a different rhythm, half, half again, then diagonal if presentation calls for a triangle. She prefers the triangle, believing it softens edges in a drawer, otherwise governed by straight lines. Each triangle joins its siblings, little sails nested in tidy regiments. Between every 6 napkins, she slips a lavender sprig dried last summer, letting the herb lend its subtle calm to the drawer. Long after scent no longer lingers in the air. Nightgowns require more breadth, less precision. She folds them once across the shoulders and once down the length, letting lace collars nestle inside the fold, protected from snagging. Then she rolls each gown gently from hem toward yoke. Rolling saves space, prevents hard creases, and allows the gown to unfurl gracefully when night comes. Rolled gowns rest in an upright row, like scrolls awaiting an archivist's hand. Shirts and chemises join the table last. Collars are tucked upward to preserve their shape, sleeves folded behind rather than across the chest. She presses each cuff flat, ensuring buttons face outward for quick inspection. 2 shirts stacked together, seam to seam. A third lies perpendicular, forming a stable cross that will resist shifting in the press. With the folding complete, she lifts the muslin sheet at one end and uses it like a sling to carry the stack toward the airing cupboard that occupies one corner of the washhouse. The cupboard stands tall, built of soft pine with slatted shelves and a small vent pipe connected to the stove flue. Warm, dry air drifts upward through the slats in a gentle column, coaxing away any ghost of moisture that survived ironing. Before loading, she tests the cupboard's climate by holding her palm inside for a slow count of 5. Wood feels warm, but never hot, and air holds no sharp scent of smoke. She places the heaviest items on the bottom shelf, tablecloth blocks, arranged side by side, leaving space at the back for the vent's rising warmth. Napkins sit on the shelf above, triangles pointing inward in a neat fan. Shirts occupy the 3rd level, rolled gowns the 4th. Delicate embroidered tray cloths rest on the highest shelf where nothing will weigh upon them. She closes the cupboard door, leaving the vent to do quiet work. While linen breathes in the airing cupboard, she turns to the great oak linen press that stands just outside the washhouse door. Its dark panels bear carvings of acanthus leaves, and brass hinges gleam like polished coins. A heavy screw press lowers 2 wide boards, one fixed above, one wheeled below, forcing out the last whispers of air and sealing fibers so creases remain sharp over weeks of storage. She lays a single damask cloth across the lower board, smoothing the surface until it looks as level as a mill pond at dawn. Another follows, then a third. She continues until 5 cloths lie stacked, each separated by a slip of acid-free tissue cut from off-white rag paper. Tissue prevents pattern embossing from one cloth, imprinting into the next. When the stack is ready, she turns the iron crank clockwise. The top board descends with a soft wooden groan, meeting the cloth and settling its weight evenly. She twists the handle until resistance matches the memory in her muscles, tight enough to discipline, never so tight as to bruise. The press will remain closed overnight, then loosened for half an hour tomorrow to relieve stress before final storage. Not every piece meets the press. Napkins already folded may go straight to the sideboard drawer. The maid carries the lavender-scented bundle into the dining hall, sliding the drawer open with the quiet deference of someone entering a library. Napkins settle into their allotted square, lace edges aligned to a hair. The drawer closes without a click, cushioned by felt strips placed years ago for precisely this effect. Back in the washhouse, she checks the airing cupboard. 20 minutes have passed. That is enough to guarantee a bone-dry confidence. She lifts one rolled nightgown and presses it lightly against her cheek. Cloth feels warm, almost alive. She transfers the rolls into a shallow basket lined with blue ticking fabric and covers them with a muslin cloth. The basket will ride upstairs to the housekeeper's closet, where it will wait behind cedar-lined doors. Before leaving, she wipes the folding table with a barely damp cloth, chasing away stray threads invisible to all but a patient eye. The muslin sling returns to the laundry shelf, ready for next week's cycle. She opens the stove door, scatters the last embers into an ash pail, and closes the flue. The washhouse cools, relinquishing its role as the household's beating heart until another Monday dawns. Folding and storage are the quiet finale that turns effort into assurance. A well-pressed tablecloth comforts a host before guests arrive. A crisply rolled nightgown welcomes drowsy limbs at the end of day. Even the smallest napkin, sleeping beneath a lavender sprig, carries forward a whisper of disciplines learned in steam and soap. The maid surveys the empty benches, the silent irons, the closed airing cupboard doors. Everything rests in order. She steps outside, basket balanced on her hip, and closes the washhouse door behind her. Distant swallows dart above the orchard, stitching silent arcs across the sky. Light glints on the brass handle of the linen press, proof that though the room is still, its work will echo through every crease and corner of the manor. Breathe in the lingering scent of warmed cotton and cedar. Exhale the hush of a job complete, and feel the gentle satisfaction that follows the final fold. The folding table now rests bare. The airing cupboard hums behind its slatted door, and the basket destined for the housekeeper's closet waits by the threshold. Yet the washhouse itself needs its own kind of rest, one earned by scrubbing, sweeping, and small rituals that leave no trace of the day just past. The laundry maid ties a plain cotton apron over her dress, rolls up sleeves already creased with honest work, and turns toward the tubs. Rinse water lingers inside the first basin, clouded only slightly by the last batch of colored linens. She tilts the tub toward the floor drain cut into the flagstone, guiding water into a shallow trough that carries it beyond the wall and down a narrow channel into the kitchen garden. There the soapy mix will settle among rows of cabbages and beans, feeding soil that will, in its own season, nourish the household again. A quiet circle that begins and ends with water. When the tub stands empty, she sprinkles a handful of wood ash across its inside surface. The ash works like a fine scouring powder, gentle yet effective. With a stiff brush, she moves in slow, even strokes along the grain of the wooden staves, loosening any soap film that clings to the edges. The brush rasp, whispers against wood, and now and then the bristles catch a tiny thread of lint, which she lifts free, and drops onto a small tin for tinder. She pours 2 buckets of fresh water to rinse away ash, and the tub walls emerge clean, pale, slightly scented with the memory of charred birch. At the copper, embers lie quiet beneath brick, their heat spent. She opens the firebox door and shovels what remains into an iron pail. Each scoop lands with a faint hiss as ash meets a stray spark still alive in the center. When the pail is half full, she carries it outside to the ash pit, sprinkling a thin gray veil across the growing mound. Come winter, gardeners will sift this ash into soil to sweeten heavy earth. But tonight, it settles undisturbed, a soft blanket against the cool air. Returning indoors, she draws water from the well and pours it into the copper, swilling the sides to loosen soap scum. With a wooden ladle, she bails the water back into a bucket until the copper empties. A clean rag wrapped around the end of a paddle becomes a long-handled mop that reaches every corner of the basin. She circles once, twice, then rinses again. Copper walls regain a muted shine, ready to greet the first boil next week without a trace of today's labor. The stove receives equal courtesy. She lays the iron grate on the floor, brushes it with a wire broom, and tips loose ash into the pail reserved for that purpose. A damp cloth swiped along the hot plate lifts starch dust and salt. Handles of the cooling irons get a last wipe, leaving their black curves free of fingerprints. She arranges them in a netline on the shelf, smallest to largest, each sole edge resting on a folded cloth to keep rust at bay. Now she turns to the floor. Straw and lint gather in corners where draft meets flagstone. With a corn-bristle broom, she sweeps from walls inward, guiding debris toward the drain. The broom's whisper blends with the rustle of her skirt. Quiet sounds, but sure enough to stir motes of dust that dance briefly in lanternlight before settling. She stoops to collect stray pegs, a single lavender sprig dropped from napkins, and an errant button that may belong to the footman's spare shirt. Each item finds its home. Pegs in the canvas pouch, lavender in a pocket, button in a small box labeled repairs. Lantern wicks need trimming. She snuffs the flame, removes the chimney, and pinches the blackened end so tomorrow's light will burn steady. Oil levels are checked. Where needed, she pours a finger's depth of fresh rapeseed oil from a stoppered flask kept on a high shelf, far from careless hands. Chimneys slip back in place, clear glass catching a last reflection of stove embers. With tasks indoors nearly complete, she opens the vent window above the mangle, letting cool evening air sweep through. Steam ghosts out, taking any lingering soap scent with it, while a faint chorus of crickets drifts in from the orchard grass. She inhales slowly, savoring the shift from warm sudsy air to crisp twilight. A final look around. The copper gleams, tubs sparkle, irons rest, and the broom stands inverted on its hook, so bristles keep their shape. On the wall a slate records the date, and a short note in tidy chalk. All linen pressed, airing cupboard clear, irons oiled. It is a simple ledger, yet vital for whoever steps through the door at dawn next Monday. She lowers the window sash, shoots the bolt, and blows out the lantern nearest the tubs. The room dims, shadows stretching long where light once pooled. Only one lantern remains alight near the door, guiding her last steps. She lifts her ash pail, closes the stove damper, and checks that the flue is set half open so residual warmth can drift upward without drawing a chill through the grate. Outside, the gravel crunches softly beneath her boots as she returns the broom to its peg under the eaves. Stars prick the sky, one by one, their cool silver a perfect balance to the day's warm copper and birch. In the stillness, she hears distant laughter from the servants' hall and the sharp call of a nightjar beyond the orchard. The manor exhales, content. She steps back into the washhouse for the final time and lifts the remaining lantern from its hook. Flame flickers inside the glass, casting golden arcs across brick, wood, and copper, the tools of her craft standing at rest. She pulls the door closed, engages the latch, and slips the iron key into her apron pocket. A last glance confirms the vent pipe draws a gentle thread of air upward, releasing the room's final sigh. Lantern held low, she follows the gravel path toward the kitchens. Behind her, the washhouse settles, dark and still, cradling clean tubs and swept stones. Tomorrow the space will host simpler tasks, from perhaps mending or polishing. But its hardest work is done. Water, fire, and human hands have returned soiled cloth to purity, and every tool now waits in readiness to begin again. Feel the cool night settle around the freshly scrubbed tubs and imagine the faint warmth lingering in brick long after embers fade. Let that warmth ease your thoughts, the sweep of broom and hush of poured water smoothing the edges of the day. The washhouse rests. You may rest with it, content in the gentle order left behind. The washhouse is dark now, yet a gentle warmth lingers inside the brick walls, the last gift of embers hidden beneath a skin of cooling ash. Buckets stand upside down on their hooks, tubs drainboard dry, and clean floors gleam faintly in the glow of a single, shielded lantern. The day's tasks are finished, but their quieter meaning remains, woven through the silence like a subtle thread of silver. It is time to pause, look back, and recognize the patient devotion that transformed rough, soiled cloth into softness and light. Across England, countless servants rise before sunrise, just as our laundry maid did, answering a summons that rarely announces itself with trumpets or praise. They move by candle and instinct, fetching water, feeding stoves, sorting, scrubbing, pressing. Each action seems small, a bucket hoisted, a paddle stirred, yet together they draw a household toward ease, allowing meals to be served on spotless damask and children to climb into beds scented with lavender. The grand house lives its comfortable life because these quiet hands lend rhythm to its heartbeat. Consider the dozens of steps we traveled today. At first light, the copper woke, its water urged to a rolling voice by humble logs cut months ago from orchard windfall. Soap shavings melted in gentle spirals, releasing a mild perfume that spoke of thrift and kitchen alchemy. Linens floated, turned, and surrendered dirt that had clung to them like shadows. Rinse followed rinse until water ran clear. Bluing whispered brightness into fibers, and sunlight stroked drying cloth on lines that swayed like slow metronomes. Then came irons, steady as metal itself, smoothing nightgowns and napkins until every crease lay quiet. Folding shaped order from softness, and cupboards offered a warm sanctuary where lavender could lend its peace. Cleaning tools and sweeping embers ensured that tomorrow's work would begin in a space as calm as an unbroken pond at dawn. Every stage seemed ordinary, yet each contained a fragment of care, and together they became a testament to diligence that often escapes notice. In the hush that follows labor, the maid finally breathes for herself. She stands near the door, lantern in hand, and lets her shoulders settle. Around her drift scents of faint birch smoke, cool soap, and damp stone meeting night air. They merge into something quietly grounding, neither sharp nor sweet, but entirely honest. She thinks of her own sleep, waiting beyond the servants' corridor, and feels satisfaction settle in her chest, like a small, steady flame. Outside, the manor windows glow dimly behind drawn curtains. Somewhere a late guest might still stir over a letter, or a footman may bank the last fire in the drawing-room hearth. Yet here, away from hushed voices and polished floors, tools slap in their appointed places, and water seals the day by joining soil in the garden. Cycles intersect. Ash sweetens cabbages, lavender calms linen, rain cleanses ropes before the next wash day. What began as water, heat, and human effort has become comfort ready to unfold at a future table or bedside. Imagine for a moment the next morning's breakfast tray. A crisp napkin folded like a tiny sail, a spotless cloth beneath silver cutlery, a soft tea towel ready to protect the pot from spills. Each item carries an unseen echo of the washhouse, snap of starch, hush of iron, gentle turn of the rinse paddle. These echoes travel upstairs, wrap around conversation, and disappear again, content to have served. Our laundry maid lowers the lantern wick, dimming its flame to a small, steady star inside glass. She turns the iron key in the door latch, listens for the click that signals safety, then slips the key into her apron pocket. The gravel path underfoot cools her soles, and night air brushes her cheeks like a calm hand encouraging rest. Crickets sing beyond the orchard wall. An owl shifts on a high branch, feather quiet. With each step away from the washhouse, the day's sounds recede. The hiss of steam, the whisper of broom bristles, the soft thud of irons meeting cloth. What remains is the memory of rhythm. Lift, lower, fold, press. The same rhythm that now invites you to close your eyes. Let that cadence settle behind your thoughts, like a lullaby played on muted drums. Inhale and feel the faint warmth of brick. Exhale and sense cool night air wrapping around that warmth, sealing it like a letter carried gently to tomorrow. Rest comes easiest when everything around you has found its own rest. Tubs gleam empty. Irons line up in quiet formation. Wooden horses stand folded beneath rafters, and folded linen breathes softly behind cedar doors. Even the copper, once rumbling with determined heat, now sleeps, its iron walls holding only silence. You may join them in that peace, allowing each breath to lengthen until it matches the calm of stone and cooling metal. If stray thoughts arrive, let them pass like sparrows across a darkening sky. Acknowledge their flutter, then watch them vanish into distance, leaving the sky clear for stars to shine. Give your shoulders permission to sink. Let lips part just enough for breath to drift freely, and allow your heartbeat to settle into the washhouse rhythm you have followed all evening. In your mind's eye, see the lantern flame shrinking as the wick lowers further, until only a soft ember glows and then fades. The washhouse rests. The manor sleeps. Gardens absorb the gift of rinse water, and sky stretches overhead, vast and assuring. Nothing more is needed tonight. When dawn comes again, labor will return. Fires to light, water to draw, linens waiting for renewed care. But that day lives beyond the horizon of your closed eyelids. For now, follow the maid's example as she steps through the scullery door, sets her lantern aside, and slips into her narrow bed with sheets she laundered weeks ago. They welcome her as surely as they will welcome you, wrapping body and mind in softness earned through patient work. Breathe once more, slow and steady. Feel the quiet settle around your ears, like a gentle cloth laid across a piano's keys to mute the final note. Sleep is ready to unfold, crisp as a freshly pressed sheet turned back on a pillow. Drift into it without effort, knowing that all is clean, ordered, and waiting for morning light.